Jujutsu Kaisen Modulo is a crazy good sequel so far. Even on its own, it stands really strong. It barely even feels like a sequel because it's so distinct and different than Jujutsu Kaisen. The art style is very satisfying and honestly stunning, drawn by Yuji Iwazaki. And of course, our boy Gege Akutame is involved doing the writing. Gege's gotten flack in the past for being a quote-unquote bad writer, so I'm really happy with Modulo. He is showing us what he's got. The story had already started strong with a very interesting premise, and has really gone in ways that I didn't expect. A big example of this is the character work that has been done with Cross, the twin brother of our beloved alien boy Maru. Cross is a stark contrast to Maru's positive attitude. At least it seems, but in the short run of this series so far, this idea has already been flipped on its head in the best way possible. I absolutely adore Cross as a character, and that's what made me want to make this video. So fellas, I've gathered you today because I'm going to explain how Cross stole everybody's heart in a single chapter. And I say everybody because I saw a lot of people on like Twitter, for example, doing a complete 180 of like being very neutral on him or like being like, he's, you know what I mean, he's there, to, oh my gosh, this is amazing. I know it's not an original thought that I had, and it was just one specific chapter that did this complete switch for the audience. That chapter is chapter 8, by the way, and I consider that the chapter that makes us understand Cross. But before we get into the details, let me introduce myself. What's up, y'all? I'm Cal. This is my channel, Cal Can, and most know me as the Kagurabachi girl of YouTube. This is clearly not a Kagurabachi video, but now that you know who I am, we've gotten comfortable, we're feeling good. Let's talk about the man of the hour, Cross. Before we get to that special golden chapter that completely switched our perspective on Cross, we have to discuss what that original perspective was, because this isn't just a Cross appreciation post. We're gonna pry this guy's brain a bit. I think understanding how our perspective was in the beginning is important for understanding our perspective of him now. As of recording this, there are 10 chapters out, and that's kind of a perfect number anyways, so we're going to talk about all 10 chapters. We're going to take chapter 1 through 7 to talk about our perspective of him beforehand, and then we will talk about our special golden chapter, chapter 8, that made everyone switch up completely on Cross as a character, because that is where we understand where he is coming from in the present. And then we will talk about the 2 chapters after that, so we won't just understand, we can fully connect. So let's start with chapter 1, which Cross is on the very first page of chapter 1 of JJK Modulo on the cover page. He's actually on the color page twice, talking about power. Power as in their power in relation to Jujutsu sorcery. But still, this is our first impression of him, and I think it's a really good and effective one. Seeing him talk about power, he looks like a looming figure. He is intimidating to a certain degree. His first lines are about power. First impressions are very important for a character because that is the very first thing we have to go off of. Now we cut to later in the chapter where Maru is explaining to Yuka how seeing her and Suguri not getting along messes with him because he has a younger twin brother who he also does not get along with, even though he's tried to fix their issues. Then later in the chapter, Suguri gets nabbed by those hands, and Maru and Yuka get into an argument about saving Suguri. Maru mentions his brother again, saying how he hasn't given up on his brother, so Yuka shouldn't give up on hers either. And there are 2 panels of Cross in chapter 1 where the guy who nabbed Suguri is explaining that aliens have come to Japan, and when he mentions diplomacy and war, it shows Cross, once again giving the impression that he is a person to possibly fear. Because war is mentioned, and then we're seeing this guy. We can assume that this is Maru's brother that he's been talking about. They look exactly alike. We know that Maru and his brother don't get along, which naturally, of course, we want to side with Maru even only in chapter 1, because immediately Maru is endearing. So you're like, wow, his brother doesn't like him, that's fucked up, because Maru's so sweet, right? So the only impressions of Cross we have so far is power, war, and he doesn't get along with his sweet brother. So now we are at chapter 2. So Cross gets introduced as the dispatch officer for the Sumerians in a flashback meeting with Mino and Usami. Seeing Cross next to Dabura, who was not named at the time, adds another layer of Cross being intimidating. Like, sure, he was being polite in the meeting from what we saw, but he also comes off as very serious, and then he's cool with this crazy looking, like, very intimidating figure. Outside of the mothership, Cross and Maru interact for the first time in the story. Cross disagrees with Maru's take that the Earthlings are just like them, and that there are good and bad people. He is very dismissive and pretty cold throughout their whole conversation, and then declines Maru's invitation to have breakfast with him. Rude. This is not a strong outing for our buddy Cross. He comes off as a dick, which is on purpose, of course. And at this point, even 2 chapters in, I briefly mentioned it before, but Maru has already endeared the audience with his big expressions and his passionate ideals, and seeing someone be mean to Maru has gotta hurt your heart a little bit. Like, reading it, it's like, oh, this little guy's so cute and his brother's being mean to him. What the fuck? Like, it's fucked up. Especially when we know that Maru is trying to fix things with his brother, but it just doesn't work. And then you see their interaction of Maru trying to be nice and go to breakfast and, like, sit down with each other for a little bit, and Cross is like, get back to work. At the end of the chapter, Suguri mistakes Cross for Maru and tries to talk to him. Of course, Cross is once again dismissive and cold, and then he scampers right off. And Suguri is offended by Maru's actions. This moment is interesting to me. It takes place on top of a tall building, and before Suguri calls to him, Cross looks to be deep in thought. There's a beauty to it with the city lights in the background, and what I would say there may be a somberness to it. This is the first time we're seeing Cross in a light like this. It just looks like there's more that meets the eye there. And this is especially going to sound like a crazy pull, but I'm going to bring it up anyways, because a lot of the time writers do little details with a purpose, so I'm bringing this up. This is the first time Suguri and Cross interact, which is important. I say a first interaction between 2 characters, especially when it's a small cast like this, is important. First interactions are done with a purpose. And I just think that it's interesting that Suguri says, if you hang out up here, people will think you're gonna jump and call the cops on you. This is Suguri just pointing out something, and it's probably not that deep at all. And it's just a little joke, because that's kind of a crazy thing to say on Suguri's behalf. Like, what's up, buddy? On this tall building, people might think you're gonna jump. Don't call the cops, just a warning. Like, it's goofy, right? But with hindsight from later chapters, readers know that Cross has gone through some terrible, awful, bad things. He's a damaged person, especially in the present. So I'm not gonna lie, when I was rereading this for the video, I was like, damn. Like, not that I'm interpreting this as like, wow, Cross was gonna kill himself, what the fuck? But I do think it is worth pointing out that something regarding mental health got referenced with Cross. That's all I'm saying. This isn't me saying like, oh my gosh, foreshadowing, Cross is gonna jump off a building. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. But also just putting the idea in your head of Cross being a little mentally unwell kind of makes sense. Does that make sense at all, what I'm saying? I hope it does. I really hope it does. The rest of this video will be more articulate, I swear. So in chapter 3, there's a Cross mention when Suguri calls Maru an idiot, and Maru says, you sound just like my brother. And then Cross is mentioned again when Maru is talking about his curse technique, because he shares his technique with his brother. Cross can tell if Maru uses a lot of energy, so he hesitated to use his powers so it wouldn't make Cross distrust Earthlings. We got a hint of this before in chapter 2 with Cross and Maru's interaction, but now we get more context. Clearly, Cross is not trusting of Earth, and really their whole operation going on here. There's no Cross in chapters 4 and 5, but there's important context for both of these chapters. In chapter 4, Maru has his dialogue about becoming somebody's neighbor, which to him means a friend who understands why the things that matter to you are so important. Then, the important context from chapter 5 is that Maru ended up going unconscious in battle, and he lost control of himself, eyes shut except for his third one. So in chapter 6, Cross senses Maru using their shared power, and comments with his usual collected composure, Maru, to think you lost control so easily. You're truly a fool, brother. And then he starts talking about a potential war. Insert meme, potential war. Basically predicting that Maru's loss of control will force the Earthlings to make the first move in this eventual war. Cross talks about this war like it is a fact that it will happen. And he thinks that once this war breaks out, we have Dabura on our side, so we'll be fine. In hindsight, this is just Cross being pessimistic, but at the time, with the context we have at this point, this is scary. Cross is the dispatch officer and was sitting in on a very important meeting, and now he's talking about war with Earth like he knows it's inevitable, especially because Mino and Usami brought up Sukuna in reference after they saw Dabura in chapter 2. So Cross bringing Dabura into this adds to how scary that situation is. Cross is like, yeah, we're gonna go to war with the Sukuna level threat on our side. We'll be fine. Like, what do you mean we're gonna have to fight Sukuna again, dog? Like, and when Cross is saying all of this stuff, the perspective is that we are below him. It's like he's looking down on us, which yet again drives home that Cross is an intimidating presence with power. This angle is very intentional. Very. I feel confident in saying that. And all of this stuff that's building up gets even worse when Cross has an internal monologue about how he doesn't care if Maru hurts Suguri or vice versa. Cross plans on letting Maru harm either Suguri or the old guy that they are fighting to let that be a trigger for war. But then Suguri desperately yells at Maru for him to wake up and stop. And then he says, quote, "I thought we were gonna be neighbors, remember?" There is a shift in Cross's cold, deadpan expression to this one where we see something click for him. Cross then quickly interferes with this altercation and gets Maru to stop, telling him to calm himself. Right after that, Cross gets angry with himself and says, "Damn it, what am I doing?" This is the most expressive we have seen Cross so far. There is a bead of nervous sweat. His eyebrows are furrowed. He's mad. There's exclamation points in his dialogue. He just acted against his own word. He was in favor of conflict with Earthlings, but was swayed by Suguri's conviction and his own connection to his brother, and acted before he could even really think. And he is angry with himself for doing this, and this is the first crack that we see in Cross. So our perspective is already starting to shift just slightly, because we see that although he presents himself as calm, cool, collected, serious, there is some emotion underneath there. He can get expressive like his brother. Even if it's not passionate happiness, it's the opposite. He's getting expressive because he's angry. This is still something we haven't seen before. In a way, he kind of outed himself as a softie a little bit, because it took literally just Suguri saying, "I thought we were going to be neighbors," and then he's like, "All right, Maru, shut it down, calm down, no war today." It's chapter 7 now. Love this chapter. This is a chapter where Cross is very important, and we can tell this because he is a part of the stunning color page along with our girl Yuka in a chapter called The Robbed. Let them cook. Holy fuck, let them cook. So, the chapter starts and Cross demands Suguri answer him what he meant by neighbors. Then, Cross goes into a whole rant about how privileged Earthlings are, and he assumes Suguri looks down on the alien refugees. He finishes off this monologue by saying, "Even if you wanted to be neighbors, we would refuse." So clearly the word neighbors is important to Cross as well, considering that's what made Cross stop Maru in the first place, and now is demanding Suguri, "We don't want to be neighbors, fuck you." So clearly this word has some significance to him as well. After this, while Maru is sent off to be treated for his injuries, Cross steals the third eye bandage and his headband and pretends to be Maru. He's not very good at this right off the rip. Suguri asks if Cross is always pissed off, and Cross does not play it very cool. It's really goofy. There's a break in our goofiness for just a moment because Suguri apologizes to Maru, who's actually Cross, and Cross looks moved by this. Just a bit, you know. So we hard cut back to the goofiness, because Cross is not a very convincing Maru when he goes to the amusement park in Maru's place. He looks absolutely miserable, but I love when he catches the balloon for the kid, and then accidentally makes the kid cry, and then he does a flip to try to calm down the kid. It's fucking hilarious, and unironically, this made me like him so much more. The kid gifts Cross the balloon after the kid reunites with their mom, and he doesn't say anything, but he is caught off guard by this. There's definitely not a negative reaction here. This whole interaction is great in showing us that Cross is not a heartless monster or anything of the sorts. He's just very blunt, very straightforward. He's not heartless, he just doesn't trust humanity. But as funny as it sounds, something like this is a great start to a change of perspective and opinion. A human was just thankful to him. Already before that, he was a bit caught up in how Suguri was apologizing to Maru, but this is someone being kind to Cross specifically. A human was just thankful to him, and there absolutely is a shift here, because from here, the Cross that we thought we knew is deconstructed, and we really see what he is made of. Yuka clocks that Cross has been pretending to be Maru this whole time, and they have a very good discussion about religion. Very good conversation, writing-wise at least, because, I mean, it was definitely a little heated, but I think it's so interesting, and it says a lot about their mindsets in a short span of time. So Yuka brings up a story about trampling on tablets, that Christianity was forbidden in Japan, so to out the Christians, they made tablets with Christ on them and instructed people to trample on them. If people refused to trample, then they were seen as Christian, and they were killed. Yuka, although she said that she doesn't believe in a god, says that if she was in their position, she would have just trampled on it and then asked for forgiveness in death after the fact. Because, quote, once you're dead, it's all over. This stings, especially because 3 pages later we learn that she has brain cancer, and it's implied that she suspected it too. So it makes sense why she would say something like that about death in regards to the tablet. Cross asks Yuka if the tablet were alive, would she trample on it? Yuka says she never thought about it that way. And in response, Cross calls her and Suguri shallow, and goes on about how Earthlings have trampled on their way of life without realizing. He feels that the Earthlings have stolen from him, and he reasons that even though those who have been stolen from don't have the right to steal from others, the temptation is there, and that she should be prepared for that. This helps contextualize why Cross was in favor of conflict with the Earthlings. He wants to steal back from them, whatever that is to him. Yuka offers to change his mind and asks her to come with her to something the next day. We see that that thing is a doctor's appointment where she gets diagnosed with brain cancer. Yuka claims that she wanted Cross specifically to come so she wouldn't be pitied, but she didn't want to be alone either. Cross uses this as an invitation to share his opinion on this and be blunt as he is. And he says that Yuka's heart died in that moment, that she learned that she had brain cancer, and that no matter what, she will never be moved in the same way ever again, because nothing will matter because she will be dead soon. And then he says, quote, "It's just an endless cycle of throwing away the precious time that you have left into a swirling pool of hatred, thinking, why did this happen to me? And why me, not him?" Yuta asks if that's how it is with Cross, and Cross answers yes, and now she's had her future stolen from her too. Yuka asks what he'll do then, if he'll steal from those who have been stolen from. Cross says not to compare herself to the Cimmerians, but Yuka points out that he already did that for her by saying you had your future stolen from you too. She says that she can't change her situation, but with time, he could change his, even though that doesn't make it any less awful. Cross is getting into it, saying how he will continue to steal so he doesn't have to live a miserable existence. Yuka asks him how long he'll steal for. Cross does not have a rebuttal for this. So Yuka continues with, quote, "Hating people and stealing from them is easy. That's why it becomes an endless cycle. Let's put an end to all of that, Cross." Fuck! Sorry, I had a moment. I gotta calm down real quick. So they are both the robbed, and this chapter's fucking beautiful, and I literally cried while I was writing this script. Something I skipped over because it broke the flow of this summary a little bit was Yuka encouraging Cross to explain what happened to his people because they are not enemies. Part of why I brush past it is because also Cross does not acknowledge this. It's moved past in the moment. But I feel like this is definitely something that Cross needed to hear. Having an Earthling ask for Cross to explain his pain and explain what he's gone through is so validating. So of course this chapter is important because we have this perspective of Cross, and now at this point we've started to understand a little bit where he is coming from, how he feels wronged, and that's why he wanted war with Earth, because he wants to steal from those who have stolen from him. Now we have somebody trying to change his perspective, which is of course the start of a possible character development. So I know I've already said a lot about this chapter because this is a very important one. It's the start of Cross's character work, absolutely. But this still isn't the golden chapter that this video is mainly about, of course. The point I've been trying to make, where we understand Cross. So before we get into that, I'm going to give us a little recap of all of our thoughts so far, so we can focus on the important things and the continued threads in this next chapter. So we know that coexistence and being neighbors is important to Maru. His definition of a neighbor is a friend who understands why the things that matter to you are so important. We also know that Maru lost his home, and the hole that's left from losing his home won't be filled until he becomes someone's neighbor. Maru is somebody who wears his emotions on his sleeve. When something upsets him, he is quick to call it out. If something makes him happy, he is quick to express that, etc. Cross is way less optimistic than Maru, and is way more closed-minded when it comes to becoming neighbors with the Earthlings. We have seen this cool, collected, serious facade break, mainly with Yuka, who he had a very important perspective-altering conversation with. You can tell by the way end that his angerness went away, and that something in him has changed. Of course, he's still angry about what he has gone through, but Yuka's words seem to have breakthrough to him. We can see that in his body language, the way he's looking at her, all of the things. The readers perceive Cross as somebody who is put together and view him as a threat, an opposing figure to Maru, and then in turn, Suguri and Yuka, and even Earth as a whole. He is in favor of a conflict between the Sumerians and Earth. But when it comes down to it in a moment of truth, he stops his twin from being a trigger for the war that he wanted. If that is the first crack in his composure, the conversation with Yuka is what shatters it. We get the insight that he only wanted war because the Earthlings have stolen from the Sumerians. He has been stolen from in the past, too. His home is gone. He is stuck in a cycle of hatred, wondering why this happened to him specifically. But Yuka encourages him to break that cycle. Now we have the setup. Our perception of Cross has shifted. We're starting to like him because we can see that there is goodness and potential lies in him somewhere underneath of that front he put up. In Chapter 8, we see why Cross is the way he is, and it is brilliantly done, so let's get into it. How Cross becomes the best character in a singular chapter. Let's understand Cross. Chapter 8 is a flashback with Cross narrating. He reveals that the village that he and Maru grew up in was leveled by the government, and he watched his parents die as they were crushed in the rubble. It cuts away from this narration style, and we learn that Maru and Cross have been stealing to survive. We see Dura for the first time, and through some convincing, he decides he'll take care of the twins. Dura quickly humbles the twins in combat and declares that they will help him with the canal he's been working on. There is some pushback, but soon enough, they are efficient listeners, enamored by Dura's strength. Maru asks Dura why he's building the canal in the first place. Then Dura explains that to get goods from Descante to Shama, there's a huge detour, so he's building the canal to fix that. Cross wonders why they being the Rumelayans, are doing something that benefits the Descante. Dura explains that the Rumelayans are the only ones who can do it, because Kalians, sacred animals to the Rumelayans, kill anyone who isn't Rumelayan. Cross doesn't like that answer, and thinks that even though they are the only ones that can do it, that doesn't mean that they should. The Descante forced the Rumelayans into this land in the first place, so why should they do this for the Descante? Dura, with his wise words, says that this isn't for the Descante, it's for the Rumelayans. He says, quote, "Even if they hurt us, we can't hurt them back. Because if Rumel doesn't change, Discante never will. In order for people with no shared land or blood ties to truly coexist peacefully, we need to have universal love and time." Cross is confused. So Dura continues and he says, quote, "It means we should be good neighbors. It's easier to accept people's differences when you have something that connects you. And this canal is going to be our connection with Discante." Boom, neighbor. Coexisting as well, Maru has gone on about before, but boom, neighbor. Keyword neighbor. That's the word that stuck with Cross when Suguri said it to Maru, the word neighbor specifically. Cross, despite Dura's reasoning, says, "I just don't understand it," and then he leaves. Cross doesn't show up to help with the canal for at least a full day, because Maru makes a comment to Dura on if Cross won't show up again. Dura tells Maru that most people think like Cross and don't approve of the canal. And speak of the devil, turns out some of those non-believers of the canal have destroyed some of their progress. Maru assures Dura that Cross did not do this because he would never, which, oh, what a good brother. Even though Cross is totally ditching them right now, Maru's still like, "Hey, so I know he was not approving of your logic, but this definitely wasn't him." Cross overhears this and sees the damage, and even though Dura tells Maru not to worry about finding who did this, Cross takes matters into his own hands. The anti-canal group is interrupted by Cross, who tacks onto their conversation about Dura that Dura is pretty stupid. But it's not referring to the canal. It's for his inaction to stop these non-believers of the canal. Cross fully says, quote, "Dura is pretty stupid, because it's faster to be a lesson into losers like you than to reason with them." Okay, little kid with aura, hello. This goes hard, and not just because it was cool. But I'll touch more on that in just a second, because after this, Cross comes back to help with the canal. He tells Dura and Maru, "Don't get the wrong idea. I just didn't want you to think I was like them." Bars, absolute heat. This is a kid who was mature enough to not necessarily go back on his disapproval, but he took his own unique stance. And he swallowed his pride from before to show that even though he disagrees with Dura's logic, he is not destructive. He approves of that behavior even less than the concept of the canal. Kind of like an even though I don't agree with your logic, I'm still going to help you. And from here on, Cross is a consistent helper with the canal. Dura eventually gets proper approval for the canal, so now the whole village is going to work together on it, including those guys that Cross roughed up a little bit ago. Cross notices them, and in this moment he thinks of Dura's words, "To truly coexist peacefully, we need to have universal love and time." Then, instead of being nasty towards them, which he rightfully could be, Cross instead approaches them, and he bows his head in apology, thanking them for their help now. Then he tells Maru and Dura, "I understand now." Absolutely beautiful stuff. And just like Cross understands now, this is what we needed to understand him. Cross is somebody who has had his ideals challenged. He didn't understand why they should help the Discante with the canal because the Discante have wronged them. And even when he still didn't like Dura's reasoning, he continued to help with the canal to differentiate himself from the destructive disapprovers. It finally clicks for Cross when he sees people come together for the cause, seeing the early traces of coexistence that Dura was on about. He understood at that moment why the canal is important, because of coexistence that will strengthen with time. This stings because in this flashback, he understands. But in the present, the Cross we know is once again angry at the talk of coexistence and being neighbors. So even before we actually see the end of this flashback, we can guess how it will end, considering Cross's new mindset has been stripped away and he's back to his old ways of thinking in the present. Something went wrong. He understood what Dura was talking about, but something happened to change that. Coexisting and neighbors are the most relevant phrases, but I want to point out the coexisting with time part of this. Because Yuka told him in chapter 7, "I can't change my situation, but with time, you can change yours." This is very similar to Dura, but now we know in the present that Cross was hearing all of this for a second time, having believed it eventually the first time, but that belief eventually vanished. Cross is more analytical than his brother. He uses logic, while Maru runs on feelings. Cross had to see the coexistence to believe it, but the thought of it was enough for Maru. I think this is the point where we truly understand his character. But now we can go past understanding and connect with him. We can become fully enamored in his character. And yes, all of this gushing that is probably about to happen will lead to an actual point, I swear. So, back to the chapter. After years, the canal gets finished. And I say years because now Maru and Cross are grown, similar almost exactly how they look in the present. The Discante ride past in a boat, and while Maru smiles up at them, Cross remains neutral. But then he eventually gives into this a little bit. He kind of gets this inspiration boost from the canal. Like, look at the look on that face. It's a gorgeous panel and a great payoff, because this is the fruits of their labor. We get a Cross narration again, just like the beginning of this chapter. Cross talks about respecting Jabaloma for cooperating with the Discante, even though his daughter died in the same way that Cross's parents did, because he never gave into hatred even though his pain must have been unbearable. Then, the narration ends out the chapter. When you start at the bottom, all you can do is crawl up. I thought things were finally starting to change for the better, but then one day, a Callian mauled the daughter of a Discante chieftain to death. What a way to close a chapter. The peek into his brain for this narration is short but extremely effective. He finally allowed himself to believe that things were improving. He was actually being optimistic after all they've gone through. But then tragedy strikes. It's amazing stuff. So now we are on to chapter 9. The result of the death of the Discante chieftain's daughter is a duel, because they claim that the Rumalaeans provoked the Callian. Dura gets gassed up as the strongest fighter, so he will fight the duel, and whoever wins settles this dispute, basically. Cross asks if they can just refuse the duel, but is informed that that would be considered losing. In Cross's narration, he says, "At the time, I should have thought more deeply about why Dura had never told Maru and me anything about the tournament." And I point this out because of the inklings of self-blame here. Cross thinking about that more deeply in the moment wouldn't have changed a thing, but for some reason he is stuck on this. Whether he thinks he could have changed the outcome with that knowledge, or if he thinks that could have made the pain easier to bear, we don't know for sure. I feel like knowing about the tournament ahead of time is such a trivial thing, but it's not to Cross. This is so sad. This is so sad. This is more of me reading narration, I'm sorry, but it really does give us good insight into his brain, because it's literally direct his thoughts. So Dabura walks out, and his presence is so immense, they knew then and there that Dura was not winning this fight. Cross's narration reads, "Suddenly it felt like my heart was going numb. My limbs weren't mine anymore, and my brain was being scraped raw. It was the worst feeling ever, and I'll never forget it." Oh my god. This, along with the expression that he was making, makes me literally need to vomit. And then the way Cross begs Yura to just run away. He says, "Let's run away," plural. Sorry. This is the part of the video where I get not normal. We understand Cross now, and now I'm like feral about him. Dura's speech before the duel is absolutely beautiful. It summarizes his whole mindset, and his maturity to level with the Discante even when he is about to die because of them is astonishing. But unfortunately, Cross and Maru have to hear these ideals that Dura taught them get utterly stomped on. The Discante listened to Dura's talk of becoming neighbors, and it was in one ear and out the other. And Cross and Maru had to witness all of this. The contrast here between Maru and Cross is really interesting. Cross had this steady sense of dread and desperation at the sight of Dabura, but for Maru, the emotion came in one powerful wave after the fight ended. Seeing the difference of how they process the events in their lives is super cool, even if the content itself is heartbreaking. And despite his emotion in the moment, Cross does stop Maru from attacking Dabura. At Dura's funeral, Cross thinks back on a memory with Dura. Dura originally brought up the concept of being a good neighbor when Maru and Cross originally asked about why he's building the canal. He continued to use the word, and one day Cross asked what the word neighbor means to Dura. Dura says, "Neighbors are friends who understand why the things that matter to you are so important." Cross thinks of the final words of Dura's speech before the duel, which was, "Accept us as your neighbors." And then Cross thinks to himself, "I can't do it, Dura, because the most important thing to us was you." So according to the definition of good neighbors that Dura said, the Descante failed to be good neighbors. Neighbors are supposed to understand why the things that matter to you are so important, and they took what was so important to Cross. When discussing what to do next, as their land was going to be invaded the next day, Maru wonders if any tribes may try to help them if they were moved by Dura's speech. This shows that Maru still believes in the weight those words hold, which is a very optimistic outlook despite the dread of the situation. Cross still believes in Dura's words as well, in the sense of he believes in what those words mean to him. A neighbor is still a friend who understands why the things that matter to you are so important, but Cross doubts that they'll ever actually find those neighbors. His faith is shattered, rightfully so. Cross and Maru believe the same thing, but their mindsets towards the situation are so different. One pessimistic, one optimistic. And Maru really steps it up in these moments. Some Rumalaeans were ready to go to battle with the Descante since they thought they were going to die anyways. Others were ready to evacuate, but after they find the mole, Maru truly shines like a beacon of hope, swaying the group to take to the skies and find their neighbors, because Dura left behind for them a path forward. Cross takes Maru's hand, but he doesn't actually say a word. He doesn't smile, he just follows. During this discovery of the mole, Cross thinks back on a memory where Dura said, "Cities and villages were all once built on the ideals of someone long ago. One day when I'm dead and gone, this canal will remain. Then, someone else will come along and build something to improve Rumel even more. That cycle makes us all become one. Don't you think that's kind of amazing?" And both Maru and Cross agree. Maybe it is the words of this memory that allows Cross to grab Maru's hand despite the pain he is feeling. That is the end of Chapter 9, and we are out of flashback territory. Now it's time to talk about Chapter 10, where we get a little more optimistic, but we're going to start just a little bleak. It'll get better, though. It gets better. The time has come for the Cimmerians to vote on if they think they should coexist with the Earthlings or not. Cross asks Jabaloma why he is withholding his answer, and Jabaloma answers that it's because Cross is doing the same. Clock it! Cross gets a little shiny-eyed at this, and he reflects back on his conversation with Yuka, a part of the conversation that we never actually saw, where she says, "You're not sure what to do either, Cross. That's why you disguised yourself as Maru, to learn more about us. Am I wrong?" Jabaloma tells Cross that he'll vote whatever Cross does, truly valuing his opinion on the matter, and Cross is conflicted. When it is the big time, Cross thinks back on the girl with the balloon thanking him. He thinks of Suguri apologizing to him when he was disguised as Maru. He thinks of Yuka's words by the water, of putting an end to all of the stealing. He thinks back on the same memory of Dura from before, where he says, "Cities and villages were all once built on the ideals of someone long ago." He thinks of his home being destroyed, rubble in his hand. And we see the confliction of the decision in real time, the intensity of all of these conflicting memories in his head. But in the end, despite how much has been stolen from him, he decides he wants to coexist with Earth. He refused to be neighbors before to Suguri, but the kindness of 3 Earthlings and the ideals from him, Dura, and Maru in the past was enough to sway him. Cross is somebody who has changed before, reverted back, and is inspired to change again. That is not an easy thing to do. That is an admirable thing to do. Yuka said similar things to Cross that Dura did all that time ago, and he chose to believe in those words a second time. And I think that is so beautiful. Genuinely. In the meeting, Cross defends Maru's absence to Osuki as well, even though Cross and Maru haven't been on the best of terms, which I think says a lot as well. Afterward, Jabaloma tells Cross that he deeply respects him. This moment is great. It feels very deserved, especially because in Chapter 8, Cross has that whole monologue where he says that he respects Jabaloma. It's a two-way respect where they both wordlessly understand each other's internal struggles. Cross responds to Jabaloma by saying, "Please don't say that. I'm just tired. That's all." He is clearly drained by this whole situation, and that's honestly such a sad response. Like, what the fuck? Someone give this man a hug, please. He needs one. I have some good news for our boy, though, because he's going to have some well-deserved fun, if he allows himself to have any fun, that is. The Earthlings and the Sumerians are going to have a cultural exchange, where they try fun foods and all these fun things. And now we have a proper group of 4 going between Suguri, Yuka, Maru, and Cross. Yay! I don't know if anyone else expected that. Like, at the beginning of the series, it seems so much like, oh yeah, we've got another trio going, you know, our iconic anime trios, all the things, right? And we get a group of 4, which, if everyone goes on about the trios, I can fuck up a good group of 4. We're gonna get to our final points. This is the portion that I've labeled the breakdown, alright? I said before that Maru is somebody who wears his emotions on his sleeve. Cross has these strong emotions like Maru, but he represses them and keeps it more to himself. He internalizes these thoughts more. He bottles it up in a sense, which of course is an unhealthy coping mechanism, and we can see how this affects him. Like I mentioned in chapter 10 just a couple minutes ago, the whole "I'm just tired." So where do we go from here? Well, I'd imagine that Cross continues to be a super cool and interesting character. Of course. I think the more time he spends with Suguri, Yuka, and Maru, the more he will unravel. I feel like he is certainly going to hit a breaking point with the way he puts up this blank, serious facade, because it is not manageable, but hopefully he'll have the support of his newly acquired pals and his brother if he eventually crumbles apart a little bit. And not to say the seriousness is all a complete facade. Cross has always been more straight-faced, more serious than his brother. Really, their body language is so different. But now I'd like to think that Cross can start a healing journey after voting in favor of coexisting and getting over that hurdle for a second time. But this is Jujutsu Kaisen we're talking about. I am absolutely prepared for the worst on an emotional standpoint because Gege Akutame loves to hurt my feelings. Especially because Yuka's words are really what got to him and changed his perspective, and Yuka only has 6 months to live. Not that I think he's gonna switch perspectives again, but just having to deal with giving in to this optimism of coexisting and then having the person that made you believe that die is, like, rough to deal with. Us readers watched Cross start as a looming, intimidating presence and progress into a character who was actually just damaged all along. He wants a war because he thinks stealing from others is his only option, because their hopefulness didn't work before. He allows himself to change again, deciding to give in to coexisting and giving neighborhood a second chance. A decision that was difficult to make and is difficult to digest afterward, but he still makes that decision. He lets his logic take a back seat and he opens himself up to optimism and hope, even if it is just for this moment. Cross's character has absolutely moved me, I'll be real, and I hope it's done the same for you. And if you didn't connect with him before, I hope you've gained something from this video. We're gonna wrap it up. Whew. This was such a fun video to make. I say fun, even though I, actually cried multiple times while I was writing the script because of Cross's overwhelming peakness, the level of peak. I can't lie, I had to bang my fist on a few tables in agony. I hope I did my boy justice, I really hope. This is new for me, I've never really done anything like this before, so I hope it turned out okay. Like this video like I like Cross, and I hope you like Cross too. Comment down below. I absolutely love comments. I love seeing what people have to say. And for a little bit of fun, since I haven't talked about Modulo before, or really Jujutsu Kaisen in, like, serious detail, I want to know who is your favorite Jujutsu Kaisen Modulo character. And who's your favorite Jujutsu Kaisen character, original series as well. I'll give you mine as well. My favorite Modulo character is, what? Shocker, it's Cross, obviously. But I've got love for Maru too. I love Maru as well. And my favorite Jujutsu Kaisen character is... It's Megumi. Don't flame me. Don't flame me. Subscribe! Please subscribe. I make Kagurabachi videos, but I've been starting to make videos about other things more frequently in between chapter releases for Kagurabachi. And if I feel so inclined to, then I might make another video about Modulo or Jujutsu Kaisen at some point, perhaps. So my instructions for you are subscribe to my channel, read Kagurabachi if you haven't, and then come back to my channel, and then you'll have a plethora of Kagurabachi videos to watch, and you'll have possibly more Jujutsu Kaisen videos. So it's a win-win situation for you. Thank you so much for watching. Bye-bye! Bye! Alright guys, if you've never been here before, this is what I call the address of the nations. Cross Nation, I'll start with you guys. Obviously, I don't have much to say because this whole video was really an address to the Cross Nation. Our boy is the best. Word, mic drop. Really the only other nation I want to address? Mino Nation. Are you out there? Is my sister the only person in the world obsessed with Mino? Or is, like, are there more of you out there? This is like a calling. It's pretend like I'm sending a beacon down trying to, like, gather you. It's like moth to the flame. Are there any other Mino fans? Comment, please. Because my sister is obsessed with him. She thinks Mino is so attractive. Yeah, Mino, yeah! And fuck you if you hate Megumi!